ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? This is Logan from the Logan For Liberty podcast. I am coming at you from the Pacific Northwest, where the sun shines so bright, only to rain just a couple hours later. I hope you're all doing fantastic. Today I'm going to talk about today, first of all, it's Tuesday. It's the 31st of July on a Tuesday. There will be a podcast every Tuesday. And if I have extra time, there will be a podcast either on Monday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. There might be extra podcasts throughout the week, but there is a guaranteed podcast every single Tuesday. I will not skip a Tuesday whatsoever. Today I want to talk about some exciting news regarding political parties. And, I'll just say it. I joined the Libertarian Party. I'll talk about that in detail a little bit more. I'm also going to talk about the next Ron Paul. And I actually want to lead with that, and then I want to talk about the Libertarian Party. And then maybe I want to talk about something Donald Trump did. It's kind of old news, sort of, but it's something that I really like that he did, because I think the last podcast I criticized him for his tariffs. So let's talk about a gentleman named Matt Gurtler from Georgia. The voting record of a 29-year-old general contractor from the little town of Tiger, Georgia, makes him by far the most independent member of the Georgia House of Representatives. In addition to his construction business, Matt Gurtler has worked as a political consultant since 2015, learning about the political process by volunteering for Texas Congressman Ron Paul's presidential campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And serving as a delegate to the Georgia Republican Party in 2013 and 2015. Since winning his seat to represent the Georgia House of Representatives 8th District in 2016, Matt has voted his conscience even on bills popular with his own party, preferring to legislate based on the principles of limited government and free market economics that inform his governing philosophy, rather than going along to get along with party leaders. This has earned him a reputation among limited government Republicans and independents, even outside his state, as the Ron Paul of the Georgia legislature. So this individual might literally be the next Ron Paul, except that's impossible. He is definitely somebody that has been inspired by the Ron Paul moment, and he's been on board since 2008. I know people who have been on board since 2008. Dave Smith has been one of them. Me personally, I've been on board since 2012. I was far too young to actually be into politics in 2008, but in 2012 I was in high school, and that was when I started actually understanding things and paying attention to the presidential elections. Well, let's just put it this way. I was in 6th grade when Obama was elected. So I just for some perspective about what I mean when I say I was far too young to care about politics when I was in 2008. But that didn't stop people in my grade from choosing who they wanted for president. Before the primary, it would either be Hillary, because they wanted the first woman president. This was happening in 2008 this was in 5th grade. This was 5th grade. This was happening in 2008. It was either Hillary or Obama that most people wanted. Some people wanted John McCain. They were the more farmer rednecks in my town. I lived in a small town. But obviously, being in 5th and 6th grade, it didn't mean anything. You didn't know why that you liked them, other than the reasons I legitimately heard was first woman president and first black president. It was historical for Obama to be elected, although I didn't like any of his policies. The only thing I liked about him was during his 2008 campaign, Obama, when he talked about being lighter on whistleblowers or being the whistleblower president. That turned out not to be true, as we saw what happened with Edward Snowden. And was it Chelsea Manning that came out when Obama was president? I'm not sure. Regardless, this individual has been inspired by the Ron Paul movement. All right, let's move on. He's got the votes to back up the reputation, as well as the scorn of the two-party establishment in his state. One Georgia political analyst, the publisher of Georgia Poll, accused Gurltler of acting like a child, excuse me, for being the only rep in the state to vote against the supplemental budget, as well as the only vote against the House Speaker's pet initiative to increase benefits for state employees. Wow. A person in politics is upset that somebody is not advocating or supporting a budget to increase the benefits for state employees. Or an initiative, excuse me. Imagine that. That's no surprise. That's not really a principled position, but Matt Gurtler here, the 29-year-old contractor from Tiger, Georgia, who worked on the Ron Paul campaign twice, definitely seems to be voting his conscience, and when he advocates for limited government, he means it. You ain't getting no increased benefits under him. Let's put it that way. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is a news site, Gurtler voted no 40% of the time in 2017 and 2018, making him the strongest voice of dissent in either the State House or Senate. According to an analysis of voting records by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I don't know what it is with my voice, I'm sorry. This is terrible. In all, he opposed 215 measures and supported 323. Overall, Republicans voted no 6% of the time, compared with the 12% among Democrats. Gurtler's supporters said his voice for limited government is needed at the Capitol. So if there's any of you limited government Republicans out there that are listening to this, you're not a libertarian, but you're registered with the Republican Party, you believe in limited government, you believe in constitutionalism, or maybe you are a libertarian-leaning Republican, but you think the Republican is the best outlet. This is the state legislature. The Republican Party has only voted in dissent 6% of the time. And the Democrats only voted in dissent 12% of the time. If anything, this is proof that Republicans and Democrats are almost exactly the same. It doesn't matter who's in power, they both will pass legislation that will grow the government. None of them care. The Republicans don't care about limited government. They campaign like libertarians, and then they govern like Democrats. I got that from Austin Peterson. I don't know. Somebody said that before. I don't know who it was, but first time I heard it was from Austin Peterson. But this is true. This is unbelievably true. When Republicans get into office, they're not voting based on limited government. They're voting based on constituency because they fall into the trap of forgetting why they were voted in the first place. They are in the pockets or special interests. They're into the pockets of special interests. They want that money. Therefore, they won't govern like the way they campaigned. It's sad, and this is part of the reason why I switched to a third party. For this article, I recently interviewed a Georgia businessman and Gurtler supporter who told me about standing in the House gallery one day and watching the votes come in on a bill to devote taxpayer funds to Alzheimer's research. Gurtler's was the only no vote on the bill. No politician wants to explain why they voted against Alzheimer's research, but Gurtler just didn't believe that's the proper role of government, or that taxpayers should be forced to pay for it instead of something else they believe in. So, that brings me to a story, just to kind of diverge a little bit. And that brings me to a recent story in the federal government. The House overwhelmingly, voted to fund suicide hotlines. Suicide hotline prevention, or prevention hotlines. Suicide prevention hotlines. Almost 200 of them didn't show up. But it was like, or maybe 100 of them, about 100. 100 and a half. I don't remember the exact number. But it was basically 300 to 1. And you know who voted against it? One Republican named Justin Amash. It's not because Justin Amash doesn't want the government, or doesn't want people who are thinking about committing suicide to seek help. That has nothing to do with it. There is nothing written in the Constitution. And Justin Amash was sent to Congress to uphold the Constitution. And you could say, well, his constituents didn't vote for him to uphold the Constitution. They probably voted for him because they thought he was going to do some other things. Well, Justin Amash campaigns on upholding the Constitution, and not only that, but when an elected official takes office, is elected to office, they make an oath. They take an oath to uphold the Constitution. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. When you get into office, your job is to uphold the Constitution. So Justin Amash voting on his conscience and voting on the side of the Constitution, he was the only Republican that didn't vote, or the only person that didn't vote to fund suicide prevention hotlines. And other Republicans or other congressmen who disagree with the government doing that didn't even show up to vote on this bill, probably because they did not want to have to explain why they wouldn't fund something like that, even though they disagree. So after reading that, that's what this reminded me of. It's such an abhorrent thing. I think suicide prevention hotlines should exist. I 100% think they should. I think school counselors should be available. I think there should be something out there for people who are thinking about committing suicide. I think there should be a place for them to go. But it's not the job of the federal government. Because not only is it not in the Constitution, it's a form of wealth redistribution, taking money from the taxpayer to fund a program just because you agree with it. You're basically just funneling money from one person who's being productive, bringing it over to another. And the stuff is easily done in the private sector. There's people that volunteer their time just to talk to people who need some help. Which reminds me, guys, if there's somebody that you generally don't talk, just be nice to somebody, okay? Open a door for somebody if you're out in public. Smile. Don't be a creep about it, though. Say hi. Say good morning. Say good afternoon. Say good evening. Have a good night. Have a good day. Just go out there and be nice to somebody, because that might make the difference. Anyway, but that's what that reminded me of. That's why I wanted to diverge a little bit. All those no votes, however, are principled, unflinchingly independent, and in line with consistent view of the role of government, which is to maintain law, not to fund special interests, even well-intended ones. In the end, the taxpayer has to pay for all those well-intended ideas, and no politician wants to take responsibility for fiscal policy and ballooning state deficits around the country. Not to mention the dauntingly massive U.S. national debt hanging like a millstone around the neck of the millennial generation and their children. With all these no votes, despite what's popular, despite how it might be spun against him in future elections, Matt Gurtler really is shaping up to be one of the next generation of Ron Pauls, influenced by the former Texas congressman's message of constitutional government, fiscal restraint, and free market capitalism. So, Ron Paul, there's a lot of libertarian type of people who like to say, oh, what has Ron Paul done for the liberty movement? These are typically big L Libertarian Party cucks. And I don't mean cuck in the same sense of alt-right. I mean, these are supposed libertarians in the Libertarian Party who are such cucks for a party that they will disavow anybody who dare runs as a Republican or who dare speaks out against their nominees like Gary Johnson and their potential nominee, Bill Weld. They will ostracize you if you dare speak out against them. It's this increasing thing to start, especially a lot of these libertarians in the Libertarian Party. They've been attempting to alienate Mises Caucus supporters. If you don't know what the Mises Caucus people are, if you're not really into libertarian politics or the Libertarian Party, it's a caucus within the Libertarian Party, and their goal is to advance Austrian economics. And then there's the Radical Party, and these are generally anarcho-capitalists and even minarchist, night watchman type states, but they believe in the principles of libertarianism 100%. And then the rest are quote, unquote, pragmatists from the Pragmatic Caucus. So there's the Pragmatic Caucus, the Radical Caucus, the Mises Caucus. There's more caucuses than that. That's a lot of caucuses. There's more than that, but those are the three main. And they're kind of battling it out. I'd say the Radical Caucus and the Mises Caucus don't 100% get along, but they're both kind of against the Pragmatic Caucus. But what's amazing is that these people in the Pragmatic Caucus who are basic beltway libertarians, they sell out their principles to try to appeal to a broader audience. What's so bizarre about them is they're not actually pragmatists. They're just sellouts. Because in my opinion, you can be a pragmatist but still have principles. And they nominated the party at the time nominated Gary Johnson, who in my opinion wasn't a pragmatist. I don't think he understood libertarian ideology. I think Gary Johnson, what he did was he went through a cost-to-benefit analysis and an issue-by-issue examination of all the issues available. And I think what he found was that the Libertarian Party, or libertarians in generally agreed with the direction that he was going. But I don't think that Gary Johnson actually understood libertarianism. He was a fan of Ron Paul, Gary Johnson was, and he was kind of a fan of Rand Paul, but he didn't know who Murray Rothbard was. He doesn't understand libertarianism. I'm not saying that you need to agree with Murray Rothbard, but at least understand the people that helped found the libertarian principle or the libertarian ideology. I want to say philosophy, but really libertarianism is not a philosophy. Objectivism is a philosophy, and that's a libertarian idea. Anyway, I'm just going on a tangent about stuff that I don't need to go on a tangent about. So should I go, or should I just talk about why I joined the Libertarian Party? How long do I want to make this podcast today? I don't really care. I'm going to make the podcasts organic. I'm not going to force them to be longer than they have to be. Anyway, I'll talk about the pragmatists versus the radicals in a little bit. Let me talk about Donald Trump. So I'm not going to read this entire article. I'm just going to skim over it. Not skim over it. I'm just going to read the summary that I wrote for it. Because what I do is, when I prepare, I read an article that I find interesting, and then I write a summary out of it based on 100% memory. It's basically me trying to actually put the memory into my brain. Not working memory, but I don't know what you would call it. It's not working memory though. It's actual memory. It's actually allowing my brain to file it away in a filing cabinet. I can't remember what it's called. That's gonna bother me. Anyway, so what I do is I read an article and then I try to write a summary about it as detailed as I can to help me, put it in my mind. So, as a result of Donald Trump's rhetoric and pressure, NATO participants are fearful of the possibility of a decrease of U.S. military presence in their countries. Part of the NATO agreement requires that countries spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense spending. This is especially concerning as tensions between Europe and Russia arise. You see, as an American, unless you're a Democrat or a never Trumper, I'm a sometimes Trump. I will praise him when he does things that I feel are in line with limited government and what conservatism should be. Basically, I have principles and my principles don't change just because the person in office changes. My principles are 100% the same, and that is how I will rate the current president or anybody in a position of power, is if they're doing stuff that's related to my principles. I don't change my principles just to agree with another person. So, one of the things that I praise about Donald Trump, unless you're a Democrat or a never Trumper, you think this is somehow treasonous, but Donald Trump isn't hard on Russia. And I like that, because we have been tense with Russia for far too long. It's ridiculous that Hillary Clinton was running on a campaign basically insinuating that she wanted to go to war with Russia. Why? I take out the nukes. I think 100% the United States would wreck Russia. That's my opinion. I'm not saying it would be easy, but I think the United States could wreck Russia. And then some of you would be all like, well, what about China? I 100% think that the United States could wreck China and Russia. We probably wouldn't be able to invade their country, and I don't think that should be our goal. I don't think we should go to war with them, but I think we would wreck them if there were no nukes involved. But Russia is a nuclear power. Russia is the biggest nuclear power, and we're just right behind them as far as nuclear weapons goes, or just the quantity. I think our technology as far as nuclear weapons is better. Regardless, if we were ever to go to war with Russia, I don't think either one of us could handle losing. I think one of us would end up using nukes if it came to a full-on war. I don't think conventional warfare lasts. And I think it would basically lead to mutually assured destruction. So that's one thing I like about Donald Trump, is he's talking to Russia. And some people are like, oh yeah, well, it's treasonous because he threw the intelligence agencies under the bus. Yeah, so what? Most of these people defending the intelligence agencies were bashing the intelligence agencies when they lied about Iraq, about the chemical weapons that Saddam Hussein had in 2003. The CIA toppled the Iranian government in 1971. Well, they didn't topple the government. They removed an elected official from power because he wasn't American friendly. But guess what? That backfired, and guess what happened? They re-elected somebody they preferred. And then what happened? We supported Iraq and Saddam Hussein against Iran in the 80s. Why was I talking about that? I think I was talking about our foreign policy backfiring on us. It's ridiculous. And just to solidify the fact that we could beat Russia if there were no nukes, we basically fought an army that was backed by the Chinese and the Russians in Korea. We pushed them back. Anyway, so one thing I like about Donald Trump, other than the potential peace with Russia, is some people consider this as Donald Trump alienating our allies, but I don't think forcing NATO allies to spend their required or their agreed upon percentage of GDP on military. Okay, so the United States spends 3.61% of GDP on military, and this isn't defense. Don't be fooled. This is not defense. We are not a defensive state. We are not a neutral state with a military to defend ourselves. I think our country should have a national defense, a really strong national defense, but I do not think our military should have a strong national offense. Um, to the credit, to give credit to Greece, Estonia, the United Kingdom, and Poland, they all have met their 2% GDP target. However, France, Turkey, Germany, Canada, no, France, Turkey, Germany, Italy, and Canada are all below 2%. I know France has talked about increasing their defense to 2%. Good. I think we should lower ours to 2%. So only 5 of NATO's 28 members, which is the United States, Greece, Poland, Estonia, and the United Kingdom, meet the 2% target. Nobody else does. And just to put it in perspective as far as the United States goes, because Greece is 2.36% of GDP, and the United States is 3.61% of GDP for NATO spending, or defense spending, I guess. That 3.61% that we spend is 22.144% of the entire NATO budget. 22% of the entire NATO budget comes from us. The biggest one comes from Germany, which is 14.65%. So we pay almost double to that of the second biggest GDP spender. And that just shouldn't be the case. I think we should lower ours to 2%. And whether or not you agree we should be in NATO, lower ours to 2%. We don't need it to be that high. Also, when you look at it, our military spending as a percentage of the world's total military spending is 40%. I think it's 46%. And to me, that's ridiculous. Alright, so, before I move on, those are just a couple things that I praised Donald Trump for. Give him a round of applause for being tough on NATO, trying to get them to pay their fair share. I sound like a socialist. And for possibly mending relations between Russia and the United States. But let's move on. I want to talk about why I joined the Libertarian Party. So 2016 happened. This was my first election cycle as a voter, as a legal voter, and I voted in it. And before the campaigns really picked up, I joined the Independent Party as soon as I turned 18. Because I didn't want to be a Republican or a Democrat. Because I always had this deep down feeling. I had no proof. I didn't really understand politics other than discovering Ron Paul. I mean, I understood geopolitics, but I didn't... And I understood how the government worked, how the government operated. I understood the 3 branches of government, how they theoretically should work. I understood the Constitution of the United States, but I didn't understand the details, is what I'm trying to say. The details were something I did not care about. But I had this gut feeling, this instinct, that there was something wrong with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And I don't mean this as the 2-party system, man. No, I don't mean that. I mean, I really felt like there was something wrong with American politics. And it turns out that, well, I was kind of right. I got into it, and I was learning about special interests. Gridlock. I like gridlock, actually. But when there's a compromise, it's generally always a compromise in the direction of what the Democrats believe. We've had nonstop perpetual war. And not just perpetual war since World War II, illegal wars that we have not declared war on. The power of our government has been... Congress has been ceding power to the executive branch. The legislative branch, which is supposed to be... It's basically supposed to be the strongest branch. The branch with the most power. They're all equal branches. Let's get that out of the way. But for the most part, the president, as an individual, had so little, or as a branch, had so little power. But the legislative branch has just given the president all of this power. The president, as we can see, can impose tariffs at will. That's not supposed to be the job of the president. That's supposed to be the job of the legislative assembly. Our trade deals are supposed to be the job of the legislative assembly. The ability to declare war is supposed to be the job of the legislative assembly. We had the Obama administration, and basically George W. Bush administration. Our intelligence agencies lied to us about spying on us until they were caught. Thank God for Edward Snowden, who, by the way, some of our favorite conservatives like Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly Sarah Palin, advocated for the assassination of Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder. Let's put that clear. Let's make that clear. But Edward Snowden he basically told you the truth about what your government was doing to violate your Fourth Amendment rights, which is the right to privacy. And yet he had to seek asylum in Russia. And Russia is a free Western liberal democracy, or democratic republic, or constitutional republic. That's not what Russia is. Russia basically has a dictator who's just not all that dictatorish because, well, he doesn't want to be overthrown. Russia, we're talking about Vladimir Putin, the guy who has killed political opponents, or maybe not personally, but has called for the assassination of political opponents. That is how corrupt our government is. Edward Snowden told the truth about our government doing unconstitutional things and violating our rights. But he's a treasonous traitor. Imagine that. Not only that, but our national debt. It's past 21 trillion. It was 20 trillion just a couple of years ago. Our taxes on the federal level are out of control. And that's not even including our state taxes. Put those together, about 40% of your entire paycheck is being used to pay taxes in some form. The regulations. So again, as I said, I just knew deep down that our government there's something wrong. It was corrupt or ineffective. So I registered as an independent. And then Rand Paul showed up. Well, Rand Paul was always there. I always kind of liked him, but I didn't know he was going to run for president. But Rand Paul was running for president, so I decided, hey, all right, I'll register as a Republican so I can vote in the primary. Unfortunately, Rand Paul watered down his message, tried to be pragmatic, and he wasn't as popular as his father. He could have been as popular as his father if Rand Paul actually operated on principle. I'm not saying that Rand Paul isn't a principled person. I think he is 100% principled. I just think he tried kissing the establishment a little too much to not kick him out, because when Ron Paul was running in 2012, they were afraid of him and they changed the rules to make sure that he didn't win. Almost in a similar way that the Democratic Party did to make sure Bernie Sanders didn't win. Although I'm glad Bernie Sanders didn't win, so there's that. So Rand Paul dropped out, so I was like, well, shit. There's nobody really. So then I decided, all right, I'll register for the Libertarian Party. And at first I wanted Gary Johnson because I was researching Gary Johnson and I was listening to a bunch of stuff that he said back in 2012, and I liked what Gary Johnson said back in 2012. It sounded like he actually understood what libertarianism was. And I was finding myself identifying with libertarianism and the message of individualism, of free markets, peace, tolerance, limited government, decentralization, and basically natural law. Libertarianism and individualism, that's what it seemed like Gary Johnson was supporting back in 2012. So I was like, okay, I support Gary Johnson for 2016. It looks like it's going to be Hillary Clinton, and it looks like it's going to be Donald Trump for the Republican and Democratic tickets. So I decided, well, I don't want to vote for these two because none of these two represent my values, and I want to be part of the change that votes for a third party to replace one of both corrupt parties, or maybe at least get them on the debate stage. And then I saw him debate Austin Peterson when they came here to Oregon, and I was like, oh man, you want to force bakers to bake cakes for gay weddings? And I didn't like that. It's not that I don't like gay people, and I don't want bakers. I want bakers to bake cakes for gay weddings. I think that would be a nice thing. But this whole thing was blown out of proportion, and I believe in property rights. I would support a boycott of this bakery, but he wanted to force this baker to do labor for something he didn't believe in. I didn't like that. And it came to the televised Fox Business Libertarian Forum, which is really just a debate. But Fox Business didn't want them to call it a debate. They wanted them to call it a forum. And it was John McAfee, Austin Peterson, and Gary Johnson. And Austin Peterson challenged Gary Johnson on the cake issue. And what happened was, he was really grilling him. And Austin Peterson said, well, what, would you force a Jewish baker to bake a Nazi cake? And then Gary Johnson says, that's my contention, yes. And that was when I was like, oh my God, you're a freaking idiot. And I just didn't understand. And there's a lot of the sellout libertarians will be like, well, is the cake issue really a hill that you want to die on? And I say, yes. Yes, it is a hill that you want to die on. If you are such a coward that you can't stand up and say, hey, I don't think we should force people to bake cakes, just go down to the bakery a block away that will bake you a cake. Why do you want to force a bigot to take your money? If that's how you really feel. Why do you want to force this person who doesn't like gay marriage? Why do you want to give them money to bake something for a gay marriage? No. Boycott him. Tell everybody how much of a jackass this guy is. Go down the street. Or drive a couple blocks away. Go to another baker who would love to serve you for your money. Or to somebody who actually believes in gay marriage. If you are such a coward that you can't stand on that principle, I don't want you. I'm not talking about like, oh, well, we can compromise a little bit. No, if you are a coward, I'm fine with compromise as long as it serves us well. But you are a coward if you can't stand upon that principle. And then Gary Johnson said he endorsed a carbon tax. A carbon tax. Now, okay, fine. Maybe we have a carbon tax. Repeal every other tax. A carbon tax just seems like he was trying to appeal to the left-wing Bernie bros that were looking for another option besides, well, Hillary Clinton. And Gary Johnson also said he didn't know who Murray Rothbard was. And then Gary Johnson also advocated for some form of federal government involvement in gun control. And basically, if you were a soldier who came back from war and you had PTSD, you served your country because you were patriotic. You were not allowed to get a firearm because you might be mentally ill. So those are reasons why I didn't support Gary Johnson, because he didn't understand what libertarianism was. It wasn't that he was... You see, there's two types of pragmatists. There's Rand Paul, who has libertarian principles, but who's trying to market them in a way that is more appealing to people. And then there's Gary Johnson, who I don't think understands libertarian principles, but I think he's only a libertarian because he did an issue-by-issue analysis of his beliefs and found that typically he favored libertarians. But he didn't understand the ideology. There are things I liked about Gary Johnson. I liked that he wanted to abolish the IRS. I liked that he wanted to abolish the Department of Education and give it back to the states. But I don't think he understood libertarianism. So, naturally, and I had already voted for him. In the state of Oregon, in the primaries, you vote. You don't use delegates. You vote via ballot. And I had already voted for Gary Johnson, not seeing the big glaring red flaws. If I could, I would have voted for Austin Peterson. But what this whole thing just really disturbed me. So I decided, okay, well, as we all know, the election happened. Gary Johnson did poorly, somehow, when we had the two most disliked candidates in all of history. But Gary Johnson barely got 3% of the vote. He didn't even make it in the debates. Well, let me be fair. Most third-party people aren't ever going to make it in the debates. Regardless, so we had the aftermath, and then the Libertarian Party seemed to be really fractured. We all of a sudden started getting anti-Ron Paul libertarian, big L libertarians. There's a difference between a big L libertarian and a small L libertarian. Anti-Ron Paul advocates, and then anti-anarcho-capitalist advocates. And I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, but why would you alienate an anarcho-capitalist? Why would you alienate them? They're the people that keep you principled. And then they started attacking people like Mises, Rothbard, and Lou Rockwell. I understand Lou Rockwell. I get that. But Rothbard, they were trying to say, yeah, you Austrian economists, you Austrians, you guys, yeah, no, we don't want you. We're going to go the Gary Johnson route. We're going to double down on Bill Weld. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the way the Libertarian Party was going. And Donald Trump, regardless if you like him, be honest. Look at every position you have and don't try to justify Donald Trump not having that same principle that you do. If you are a limited government conservative, constitutionalist, or libertarian, look at Donald Trump honestly and figure out how much you actually agree with him. I did that despite liking him more than Hillary Clinton. There is not much I could agree with Donald Trump on. Quite frankly, I didn't even know where Donald Trump stood. And I still don't on most issues till this day. The only thing that I know about him is that he likes pissing off Democrats and he still wants to build the wall. That's the only thing I know about him. He's flip-flopped on gun control. And he's increased the deficit. Sure, we got some tax cuts. Okay, cool. Do something about the budget. Ask Congress to balance the budget. Man up. Go to Congress. Tell them to balance the budget or shut the government down. But no, he can shut the government down to get funds for his wall, potentially. Audit the Fed. You don't have to end it. Just audit it at the very least. The Federal Reserve is manipulating our currency by adding fiat currency to the economy, which causes inflation. And they're keeping artificially low interest rates. That's dangerous. And in case you don't know what the business cycle is, interest rates signal the economy. They signaled the markets how we're doing. Low interest rates say, hey, we have an abundance of money. Come borrow from us. High interest rates say, hey, we don't have an abundance of money. Therefore, come save with us and you'll get some nice interest when we loan out your money. So interest rates are really important. Donald Trump is no different than Barack Obama or George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or George H.W. Bush. He's no different. We have increased government spending, increased government control, centralized control in the executive branch, perpetual war, maybe regulation. Maybe Donald Trump is somewhat good on regulation. That's about it. And I didn't like the way the Libertarian Party was going either. But I decided, okay, well, let me do it. Let me do it this way. If I had to choose the lesser of two evils, it would have been Gary Johnson. And I ended up voting for Gary Johnson in the general election, even though I didn't really like him. But I thought he was better than Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So I picked Gary Johnson because he was the lesser of two evils. And looking at him, I could at least get on board with a lot of what Gary Johnson was saying, but I thought his candidacy, I thought his campaign was terrible. They were trying to market libertarianism as if it was this centrist, moderate idea. It's not moderate. It's not centrist. It's pretty damn radical. And there's nothing wrong with that. Free market, free minds. But, so, looking back at it, in retrospect, I decided, well, I could either sit back. I live in the state of Oregon, so it doesn't matter who I vote for, the Democrats winning. And I decided, all right, well, Donald Trump, I don't believe in most of what he says, and I hate the direction the Libertarian Party is going. But I think I could affect more change in the Libertarian Party. And then even though the a lot of big L Libertarian Party members were trying their best to ostracize people like me, I saw Dave Smith, the Libertarian comedian, join. I saw Jason Stapleton join. I saw Tom Woods join. And I was thinking to myself, wow, that's amazing. If they're joining, and they were joining because of the Mises Caucus, then I'm going to join because of the Mises Caucus. And the Mises Caucus boomed just like that. They think of any libertarian who was an anti-libertarian party person. Because of the Mises Caucus, they probably joined. The Mises Caucus brought in so many never Libertarian Party libertarians. And so I was like, all right, well, if these guys join, then I'm going to join. I'm going to try to affect some change. I'm going to vote for the guy that actually believes in libertarianism. I learned from my mistake of voting for Gary Johnson in the primaries. I'm going to try to affect some change. And I'll pledge $25 a month so the Libertarian Party can grow, because the Republican Party isn't a limited government party. It never will be. Not again. The only limited government individuals I can think of are Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Thomas Massey, and Justin Amash. We might get Austin Peterson. Who knows? The Republican establishment is working really hard against him. So you can laugh at the Libertarian Party for that guy who stripped, and then the Aleppo moment and the bake the cake issue. Fine. Go ahead. Make fun of the Libertarian Party. But if you believe in limited government, well, good luck voting for somebody in the Republican Party that will advocate for limited government. Claire McCaskill isn't a limited government person. Or Mitch McConnell, sorry. Mitch McConnell isn't a limited government person. Donald Trump isn't limited government. Let's be real. That's about it. I think I ranted more so than I actually told you about why I joined the Libertarian Party. I want to affect change. I think that pledging $25 a month will help the Libertarian Party gain ballot access, especially with all the other people that have joined. I think the Libertarian Party is the only way forward. I mean, I will support the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'll advocate for people within the the Republican Liberty Caucus, the Libertarian Republicans, or constitutional conservatives. Those are people I will support. But I think the Libertarian Party is the best way to advocate or push the message forward. And another reason why I'm supporting the Libertarian Party now is because, obviously, like I said, I think I can affect more change. But I think if we can just get a libertarian at the head of the ticket, we can maybe change the way people look at the Libertarian Party. Because maybe when people think of the Libertarian Party, they will actually think of a libertarian. We can get past this whole stereotype of libertarians just being Republicans who like to smoke pot or pothead intellectuals. That is one of the most frustrating things to me. And it's not even anybody else's fault that they believe that. That's who we've elected. Those are the people that we let up at front. The Libertarian Party isn't the pot party. The Libertarian Party is supposed to be founded on the ideas Sorry, the Libertarian Party might be the pot party, but libertarianism isn't about pot. Libertarianism is about individualism, peace, tolerance, free markets, limited government, Austrian economics, economic freedom, sound money, decentralization, natural law, community. Those are all the things that the Libertarian Party stands for. Therefore, those are all the reasons why I joined the Libertarian Party, because I want to advocate that message and I want to affect change and have somebody who is head of the Libertarian movement talking about those principles that I care about. And that's why I joined the Libertarian Party, and I am passionate about it. Have a good day.